We have talked a lot about historical developments and government in ancient Greece, so I thought it might be fun to talk just a little bit about the tactics that Greeks used in the battles that we have touched on. Keep in mind that ancient Greek warfare, especially in the Archaic period, is still hotly debated among modern scholars of antiquity. I can give the simplest and most basic introduction possible, but almost everything that follows is controversial, and some respectable people out there will disagree. The basic kit of a Greek soldier is a lot heavier than most people expect. Greek soldiers were expected to wear a breastplate of bronze and bronze greaves or shin guards. He also wore a helmet, often of bronze, and he carried a large circular shield, either wooden or wood with a coating of bronze. The shield could be elaborately decorated, but the Spartans were known for having a uniform design on their shields, with each shield having only the Greek letter lambda on it, for Lacedaemon. Lambda, which makes the L sound. This equipment, which altogether was called the panoply, could weigh as much as 50 or even 70 pounds, which our poor soldiers would be wearing throughout the whole engagement. An infantryman fitted out like this was called a hoplite. Each hoplite would be expected to provide his own armor, which was not cheap, and so only men of some means would be able to fight like this. All male citizens who could afford the panoply were expected to purchase it and to be ready to fight and stand in battle for their polis if it was invaded. The details may be controversial, but it seems reasonable to assume that this outfit, this hoplite panoply, only makes sense in the context of the phalanx. A wall of men advancing as a unit until someone tries to stop them. The Greek hoplites would stand in a formation of rows or ranks. Traditionally, the ideal number of ranks was 8, so a phalanx was supposed to be 8 men deep, as shown here. Marathon demonstrates that this is an idealized picture, and it was flexible, since, if you will recall, the center of the Athenian phalanx at Marathon was reduced to 4 ranks, so that it could be stretched out farther and avoid envelopment. When the hoplites marched forward, they did so with their shield, or hoplon, on the left arm, covering not themselves so much as their neighbor, while they were protected by the shield to their right. In his right hand, the hoplite carried a 6-foot-long spear called a dory, D-O-R-Y. When the phalanx marched, the ranks in the front would hold their spears out in front of them. A few ranks back, when the spears were not long enough to poke out the front of the line, the hoplites would march holding their spears upright so as not to endanger any of the men on their own side ahead of them, so that the spears would be ready in case the men in the back were needed up front. There is pretty intense debate over the overhanded versus underhanded grip of the spear, since ancient artwork shows hoplites holding it both ways. The military historian Victor Davis Hanson gives the explanation that is considered standard today, which is that the hoplites held their spears with an underhanded grip while marching for the enemy, and they did this for their own comfort, but they could switch to an overhand grip during the actual battle. As far as I'm concerned, it seems a little difficult for me to believe that hoplites would have been able to find the time and the space to switch the grip of their 6-foot-long spears in the middle of battle, but maybe that's just me. With Greece mostly left alone until Marathon, Greeks came to expect that their battles would largely be one Greek phalanx against another Greek phalanx, when one polis tried to invade another. There was some gentlemanly or sportsmanlike quality to the hoplite battle, with both sides taking the effort to look for a level field on which they could march against each other on an equal footing, with both phalanxes intact. The two phalanxes would meet and try to stab each other with their spears until their spears broke. When their spears broke, the hoplites would reach for their short swords, which they would use to try to stab their way forward as long as they were able. Now, the next part is the most controversial point of all. Many scholars disagree, but the traditional explanation of hoplite warfare, or the traditional description of hoplite warfare, is that at the end of the stabbing, there came what amounted to a shoving match. When the swords did no more good, the two sides would brace themselves on their shield and continue to push forward. This shoving match, or othismos in Greek, has been likened to a rugby scrum, but remember that the hoplites remained completely upright the whole time, with their huge shield with the huge shields of the people in the back of them pushing them forward, adding force to their own push. The goal of all this was to break the enemy line so that the phalanx's integrity of the enemy was compromised and the enemy hoplites scattered. When a phalanx scattered, the other side would declare victory by simple virtue of their remaining on the land. Another hotly debated point is whether this picture that I've given of the explanation of a hoplite battle, if it is even accurate at all, developed quickly in the early Archaic period along with the rise of the polis, or whether it came out gradually throughout the Archaic period in fits and starts, with a lot of trial and error, developing slowly during this Archaic period. We have remains of very early Archaic hoplite shields that were dedicated at Olympia. So, one important question is, do the shields imply the phalanx as described earlier? Or did Greeks experiment with the shields in different ways before settling on the phalanx formation by the classical period? There will never be an end to the writing of articles on the shoving match. The Spartan poet Tyrtaeus does seem to describe something like it, but his work is fragmentary and vague, like poetry often is. The Greeks are credited with something really new in the history of warfare: heavy infantry. The phalanx was the basic unit of fighting throughout the Greek world. The Spartans were uniquely skilled at it due to their lifetime of drilling, but their tactics did not differ from other Greeks. The Greeks fought this way with each other until the tactics were tested against a foreign invader, when the Persians came. To almost everyone's surprise, the hoplite phalanx proved effective here as well. As I said before, virtually all the details are controversial today, and everything I have said can be and has been contested. Still, I think this introduction does give us a useful overview to some of the major issues at play in the study of ancient Greek warfare.